Okay, good night, everybody. And I do hope that you're able to hear me. I want to sort out that first to make sure that you're able to hear me. So if someone could just give me a thumbs up in the chat or somewhere there, just to let me know that I'm coming through loud and clear, then I would know that I could proceed. And I see. Okay, wonderful. So welcome to this evening's Following the Science on COVID-19 Part 2. Now, we did Part 1 sometime last year. I think it's in October or November thereabout. And we just shared information. We're in the information age, and we're in that time where we are to share information and just equip people with things that they may not hear. We already know that depending on the country that you're in, certain information is not going to be readily shared for you to have access to it and to make certain decisions. The truth is that each country creates a kind of atmosphere depending on what they're trying to achieve through, just the unified effort of the media, governmental agencies, and so on. And not to say that anyone is bad or so, but that's just the truth, depending on the country that you're in. So today, we welcome you to Part 2. And I've been getting some requests. Say, hey, when are we going to do Part 2 of Following the Science? And following the science is as it suggests. Science is emerging, all right, especially on this novel coronavirus, and anything that comes out of it is even more novel. So the science is actually emerging. You're right. There is actually no one who can say, like, listen, I am the ultimate authority on this, and you must, and there can be no other way. Science is something that we observe, and we have privilege to observe it. The specialists in the area of science in different areas of microbiology and whatever their disciplines may be, epidemiology, these people are just really using their training, what they have trained and specialized in, and just really seeing the way that this pandemic and even the virus goes. So there is no one person who can say, listen, I am the authority. Rather, we ought to be humble and to say, hey, what is the science showing us? And that is what this evening is all about. For you and I to lock in and say, hey, you know what? I want to know what the science says so that I can now make good decisions or informed decisions based on what I feel and I am conscientiously moved to do inside. That's what this is all about. Sadly, though, we've come to a time where sharing certain information is like, creating a situation where it's flammable and inflammatory, for want of better words. People used to say, hey, certain things I don't discuss, religion and politics. And to that, you might add COVID-19, okay? And it shouldn't be, because we should be able to talk about these issues. We are human beings, and we should be able to converse with one another, understand each other's point of view, and still live together in harmony, all right? And especially on a subject which is emerging and unfolding, we should each be humble as we come toward it. And we should also be respectful for other people's view on the matter, okay? So I hope that is making some sense so far. This evening's purpose is to inform you. This evening's purpose is to have you leave with some information that you can give to those who you care about, your loved ones. Maybe you've had these information already. That's awesome if you have some of these information already. Great, keep on sharing them. We're in the age of enlightenment or information, right? It's some of us may need to inform our employers or employees or stuff like that, all right? Some of us may need to take some of this information and say, hey, to your doctor and ask them what is their feedback on some of these things, all right? So if you're someone who has any critical care conditions or so on, special care conditions, you want to make sure that you run everything with your doctor. And I believe that's how it should be. The practice and the science of medicine is between a doctor and his patient. And whenever governments get overreaching and try to come in between that, it generally creates a problem, All right. And history doesn't look back too kind on that. All right. So take information, make what you will of it. And I hope that this will just bless you as you're on here this evening. All right. So that's it for introduction. I hope I haven't left out anything. I can tell you though, what you're about to see is some uncommon facts. You will not have seen this on the national media. It's not going to happen. But there are facts anyway. There are other side of the coin. There are things to consider, but it's just not, it won't be readily available to you. You would have to know the channels to get such information so that you could be informed. All right. All right. So let's get into some news. I want to share some things with you here because we've been seeing some news coming out over the past couple of weeks. Some of it kind of, saying, really, is that really happening? One of them that really shocked me was this one here. It will be coming up on the screen shortly. And this was about just late last year, talked about the place called Gibraltar, which is an island off the coast of England. And they have achieved 100% vaccination rate, yet still for some reason, they are having another surge of new infections. And they were thinking about just, hey, toning it down for Christmas. And that was something that is counterintuitive. No one expected that. People will be like, really? I never thought that would be the case, but it was so. And of course, the reason was given is that we don't have enough boosters and stuff like that. So that was one of those things coming out of the news that really, shocked me. I don't know about you, but I wasn't expecting to see that you would have a country that has achieved what most other countries are trying to achieve, yet still missing the mark because of lack of boosters, as they say. All right. And that's just the truth. I'll just share with you that clipping. I'm about to share with you just some other things that have come out as news over the last couple of weeks, and maybe shocking to you, may not be shocking, but I know it was for me. One of them was this one here, that Israel was preparing for a possible fourth dose. I'm not seeing that news clipping at this time, but that one was shocking. Here's one where Fauci was actually saying that, hey, you know what? Hospitalizations are rising among fully vaccinated in the US. For him to actually admit that was something, out of the ordinary. You wouldn't have expected that. And you may have seen some of these things, and that's good if you did. All right. So they're sharing some news clippings with you that came out over the last couple of weeks that, all right, that really shocked me. I don't know about you, but here's another one. And this was about Israel. We know that Israel is like one of those poster countries that you can say really got the job done quickly in terms of vaccinating a large proportion of their population. And here we have where Israel is preparing for a possible fourth COVID vaccine dose. No one saw that coming. All we saw was that, hey, you get the 2 doses and maybe a booster down the line, maybe 1 or 2 years. But then we've seen the time being truncated that they said that you're going to need a booster. And then the definition of a fully vaccinated person may also change along the line. All right. So many things are happening that we live in a world that is, want of a better word, it's exciting, it's dramatic. All right. To be alive at this time and to see how things go. But you want to know that you take a stand where history will look back and say, hey, you did the right thing. Acting out of fear and any other form except grounded common sense and love is going to create not such a good thing. Here we have, in Jamaica also, people making stances and saying, hey, no welcome mat for people at, the Cecile's house, for example. And she wasn't alone in that. But many persons start to say, listen, if you not fully vaccinated, you can't come to my home and all these things, okay? And what we're going to see this evening is that probably it's their choice, their home, but is it grounded in science as we follow the science? All right, so these are the things that we want to talk about this evening. Just maybe 1 or 2 more news clippings, that really struck out to me over the last couple of months. And it's changing so quickly that a lot of the information that I'm sharing here is almost old news. That's how quickly things are changing. All right. Singapore, for example, one of the first countries to be accepting an endemic situation. And endemic simply means it's a virus that you live with and you learn to cope with, and you focus more so on treatment. And because you've already accepted it, that everybody is going to be exposed. And I think at the ending of this presentation today, we're going to see that Omicron seems to be that thing which is going to bring in endemicity once and for all for everyone. All right. So here, in Singapore, they show the world what endemic COVID might look like. And this was a news clipping. You can go back and read it. This is all the way from September of last year, as I told you. So already there you saw signs, harbingers of what's going to come for the rest of the world. As a rule, Europe rolls out things first. Europe recognizes things first, then the North America, and then other countries such as the Caribbean and so on. We're far behind. But we live in a world today, because of communication, globalization, it's almost like we're in the same place. So you can get this information. All right, so that was it for some news. A lot more happened. Some of it I choose not to share, but just to share these things. All right, but what we're seeing, there was another news clipping. No, I have to share this one. And it was that scientists were actually mystified by what was happening over there in Africa. It actually came out in the Jamaica Gleaner. I hope you saw that. First published by the Associated Press and then taken up by the Jamaica Gleaner. I know I have it here somewhere. Just the clipping. Yeah, here we go. All right. And that was on November 21 last year. It says here, scientists mystified and even wary as Africa so far, I would put there, avoids COVID-19 disaster. Okay. So Africa, the continent of Africa, so many countries over there, but a lot of persons not having access to certain things that people in the first world and developing countries have access to. Yet for some reason, which they're still looking at, they have avoided a COVID-19 disaster. And at the time of this news clipping, actually 6% was their level of vaccination. So that's like, wow, maybe there are other things, maybe there are other factors to the whole thing. And it's not just that alone. And maybe our focus is not just to be only, so myopic. And maybe we ought not to create a divide in the society based on that, because obviously it is not the only deciding factor in the outcomes that we want to achieve. All right, so I hope that is making sense so far. All right, so we're going to go into some preliminary stuff. I mean, I'm going to get into the main thrust about tonight is to share with you some scientific papers and studies. The last time we shared 10, and at the end of this, you can send in your email address in the chat so we can forward these studies to you so you can have them for your perusal. But I'm going to go through them. But before we get to that, just going to deal with some stuff, like some preliminary things that is important for you to know. All right. One of those things I must talk about is a false dichotomy. Dichotomy is like either or. It's like two sides of a coin. But I believe that a lot of times what's going on out there has created a false dichotomy. One of them is this, that you're either vaxxed or unvaxxed, and for some reason it has separated families. People are no longer talking to their friends. And then some people, it's like, hey, whatever, man, it's your choice. This is my choice. And we can live together in perfect harmony. And that is true. All right. But there is this dichotomy in the society where we're separated by a pharmaceutical intervention. And I don't believe that anyone should be separated by a pharmaceutical intervention. All right. So don't let a pharmaceutical intervention separate you, your close family, your friends. There, as we've shown by even some of these news clippings, you can see that, hold up, probably there are other things as well that we need to consider. There are persons who have just chosen and say, hey, you know what, I'm wary. I'm not so certain. I don't want to take this. And right away, people brand them, people stereotype them. This kind of thinking we want to stay away from. All right, because name calling and branding and stereotyping gets in the way of robust exchange and conversation where we can uncover things as we talk together. All right. Another thing is that there's a lot more classes of people than if you have received a certain treatment or not. All right. There you have age stratification. You have persons who are young, people who are old. You have people with underlying sicknesses, what we call comorbidities. It's so many things. It's so we don't want to be so simplistic and gross in our thinking, just to say, hey, if you have, you're on that side. And if you have not, you're on that side. So stay away from me, kind of thing. And that is just showing you that we're misinformed somewhere along the line. And we want to clear that up. As I said, will history look back kindly on the way that you've acted today? If time lasts 5 years from now, will you be proud of the way that you acted in 2021, 2022? All right? Or will you be so ashamed? And if we know history, we'll see that, wow, we want to take things slower in terms of how we characterize or say things about other people. All right. So not everyone who chooses to not accept something is so-called anti-vax. And I know that term has been thrown around, you're an anti-vaxxer and so on. And the average person who's using that don't actually know who an anti-vaxxer is. Technically, who the anti-vaccination campaign or movement is, because there is such a movement and campaign in the world. And if someone is wary about something and say, hey, I choose to stand down and not go that route, they're simply an anti-vaxxer. We have to be we want to be thinking much clearer than that. So categories like, have you received it? Are you naive, or have you received the illness, and have you recovered? There you go. That's another category. I talked earlier on about age and comorbidities. And on top of that, have you received or not? All right. So let us not fall prey to false dichotomies. We want to be thinking at every turn, but it's hard to do so when you live in a certain environment. You have to make that choice to say, hey, I'm going to be thinking differently. Okay. And not to be labeling people or, just treating them differently. I want to share something with you, which I came across, which was very interesting to me. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you a document. And you have this thing called Freedom of Information Act, in other words, called FOIA Act, where citizens of a country, especially the United States, they can write to their government and request certain information, and their government is beholden to give it to them. Isn't that amazing? All right, kind of like some transparency there. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and share with you something that I came across that I think at the start of this, you should know. All right, so I hope my screen is sharing. And here I go. Let's go to it. All right, so first I'm going to go to what we call the FOIA. Here we go. So right on your screen now is a FOIA request. All right, so I hope that you're seeing it. And you have all these letter headings and so on. But basically, what they were asking is this: COVID-19 reinfection and transmission. All right, so I hope you can see that right there on the screen. That is what the whole freedom of information access is all about. So they said, dear sir, madam, this firm represents the Informed Consent Action Network, ICANN. On behalf of ICANN, please provide the following records to a certain email address in electronic form. And what they're requesting were documents reflecting any documented case of an individual who, one, never received a COVID-19 vaccine, so they never had it. Two, but they were infected once. And three, they recovered and then later became infected again and transmitted it to another person when reinfected. Very strategic things that they're asking for, right? So you can understand it. I just need, if you have documented information on anyone who may have received, who not have received any vaccination, but became ill, recovered, and then caught it a second time and went on to pass it on to someone else. And here is their response, right? So I'm about to give you that response here. And all right. So here's the response. It says, "Dear Ms. Byrne, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry received your September 2, 2021 Freedom of Information Act request." All right. And they recite what they were seeking, but here is the answer right here. It says, "A search of our records failed to reveal any documents pertaining to your request. The CDC Emergency Operations Center conveyed that this information is not collected." All right. So in other words, they do not have it. All right. That was very important because that's the belief that, hey, even if you're naturally recovered, you can catch it again and pass it on to someone. But once again, this evening, what is it called? Following the science, not following the narrative or following the feeling or following the gut feeling, or this is called following the science. Based on the science, there is no such thing. All right. As they said, they've not collected it. In other words, they do not have such information. But that information has caused people who have even said, "Hey, I'm convalescent, I've had it, and I'm here today, I'm doing much better." Say, it don't matter, go and get that thing. Many employers are saying this to their staff. I don't know if they know this. And that is why we'll send these things to you so you in a bit can have a decent, respectful conversation with your employer and say, "Hey, consider this what I'm saying. Let's bring in even maybe a medical doctor and say, hey, what we're saying here," not just to levy down things and say this is it, because we're all human beings. And at the end of the day, we still have someone else that we must be answerable to. All right. So I just wanted to throw that in there. At this point, I want to make a differentiation between SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. And why is that important? Because we just use the terms loosely. All right. You get a test and you say, hey, you have COVID. No, COVID-19 is a different thing. All right. That's the viral disease, or it's not only a respiratory distress viral disease, which is also an inflammatory thrombotic phase called COVID-19. It is a disease that people develop. So one is the disease and one is the active pathogen that causes the illness. There are two different things. All right. They're not the same. All right. So when someone says that they have developed COVID-19, that's different from saying that you've tested positive to be a carrier of SARS-CoV-2 in your nasopharynx. All right. Very important. And you'll see why it is so important later on in the study. All right. Not the study, in the presentation. So if you've tested positive, you may not, automatically, you just can't say you have COVID. All right. COVID is a disease that people develop and may actually take your life. All right. So don't try to develop that thing at all. All right. So the viral structure of the virus right here on the screen. This is a simplistic presentation of it. But one of the things is that many spikes, and those spikes interact with what we call your ACE2 receptors with TMPRSS. Just know that it interacts with it and opens it up and goes in. All right. And that's how a cell becomes infected, and then it takes over that host cell and starts to replicate. And so if that goes on unchecked without your immune system coming in and stopping all that's going on, then you may become ill. And for most people, they will overcome it. All right. But we've lost many loved ones, people lost loved ones and family members, friends, and that is for a reason. And we're going to talk about that too. All right. So you've probably heard about gain of function testing. And if there's something that you want to say to me or in the chat, you can feel free to ask that question. I'm not going to be taking the questions now, except that it is on the actual topic on which I'm speaking and if I see it. All right. So once again, provide your email address in the chat because you want to have this information. Judge what I say. Don't become angry at anything. You want to be humble. You want to be pliable to say, hey, where is this thing leading? You want to be able to question even what you think you know. That is how you know that you're a true learner, that you are a true educated person, is one who is able to say, hey, I believe this, but I'm now learning this. And it has challenged what I thought I knew. And now I know why, there was some discrepancy in my belief, because you're learning. Someone once said that the true extent of your knowledge is to know the extent of your ignorance. That is how you know that. And every expert in every subject knows that there are things that they don't know. And the things that they don't know keep them learning. So be careful of being fixed on one thing. Okay. So you may have heard of gain of function testing. And you're like, what is gain of function? Well, just like it said, you gain addition function. It's like something that learns to do something new. All right. There's actually loss of function as well. So there's gain of function, mutation, and there's something called loss of function, mutation. These things happen naturally to a certain extent among certain pathogens, okay? But when human hands get on that, it's a different ball game, all right? And what you have happening is where you have chimeric amalgamation of two things. You take the backbone of one virus or a pathogen and you splice something over it. And what happens is that pathogen is made more infective or even pathogenic, in its ability to make you sick. So gain of function testing is something that has been going on for years now. Certain governments have outlawed it, and there are movements in the United States moving to say, hey, let's close down this thing. But you have chimeric. So you may have lab rats that are not truly lab rats. They have certain things in them from human beings so that they can do their testing. But true gain of function is where you teach a virus or any pathogen how to evade or a certain immunity, or to become more effective than it would naturally do all on its own. All right, so that's been going on a lot. So, but in all this, what can you and I do to stay healthy? From my perspective, I believe there are 8 laws of health. 8 laws of health. All right, and I can share those with you. But you need to boost your immunity so that you can prevent attachment. All right, you need to be doing your oral rinses, your oral nasal rinses, especially when you're out in areas that you congregate with a lot of persons and you want to be boosting your immunity. Health is the new immunity, okay? There's a time that you could just say, I just want to boost up on my vitamin C and I'm okay. But if you have comorbidities, that alone may affect you in terms of your ability to fight even this disease or to not become sick by it. All right. So if you have contracted, you want to inhibit replication, and you're talking about your zinc, your vitamin C, you're talking about your vitamin D, that actually blocks it getting into cells. But if it gets into replication, you want to be doubling down on your zinc. And coming out of here, you want to type in zinc and replication. I was in a pharmacy the other day and they were selling some tabs, and one of them had zinc and one didn't. And the young man said, so what the difference? And the person at the front didn't know to tell him. I said, hey, zinc, studies are showing that when you have zinc, it cuts any viral replication. And we need that information. We need to become more intelligent in the care of our bodies, all right? And the information is there, so you can go and research that. So we're gonna get into the studies, and I hope that you will understand them. But before we do, I wanna talk about some untruths. I don't wanna use the word lies, it comes off differently, but things that turn out not to be true. One of them is it's extremely deadly no matter who you are. Okay, I remember when COVID-19 was just coming out, we all thought we were going to die. Well, I didn't think so, but I said we because that's how we all felt. And when the first case registered in Jamaica, oh gosh, you remember that when you were on looking at your TV and you see this man in Wuhan, China, just drop down dead in the line, and you're like, geez, this is like what you watch in the movies, and that's what you're telling yourself, that we're not going to survive this. Well, it turns out that it is extremely treatable. And it is not just a kill for everyone. It is a disease which is extremely treatable and is amenable to many things, amenable to comorbidities, amenable to your age. It is very amenable to risk stratification in other terms. Someone may just shrug it off in 2-3 days, and then someone else gets it. And because their body's already they have certain inflammatory diseases going on, or their age, advanced age and loss of immunity, it turns them over and they can lose their life. So with such a case, then how we approach it, I believe should be different. Another thing is the PCR testing. I don't know if we've ever stopped to consider PCR testing, but it's a very long name. All right, we're not going to talk about that. But basically, PCR testing, what happens there is that they look for sequencing of genetic material, okay? And they would push that thing down there and they would swab your nasopharynx, and then they would send that in for some testing. I want to share my photos here. I think I have a picture with that going on. Somewhere there, can't get to it right now. Let's leave that alone. All right, but what happens with PCR testing is that the bits of genetic material that it picks up so small. A PCR test is very accurate in detecting genetic material that may belong to some pathogen. So it will pick it up. But because the bits are so small, what happens in PCR testing is that it is magnified over and over again, all right, or amplified over and over again. And the rate at which it is amplified is called the cycle threshold. All right, so what is recommended is 20, but there are labs that go up even to 40, 30 and 40. All right, so you cycle that amplification to a level until you detect the genetic material. All right, of course, if the person has a large amounts, like they're really infected, about 20 cycle thresholds, and there you go. And you can say, hey, this person truly has this. And based on the low cycle threshold, this person, I can say, has this carrying on and maybe is infected at this point. But if you have a high cycle threshold, then it may not be so. Actually, it came out in the news where some men boarded a plane in one country, negative, based on their PCR, got off in the next country positive. How did that happen? Maybe they got it on the plane. Or maybe the testing facilities use two different cycle thresholds. There's actually this paper, I came across it once, that is called Your Coronavirus Test Says Positive, it probably should be negative. Search that on the internet, see if you come up with it, and read that. It's a great paper that you can get for yourself to read and say why that is. So the end all of it is that while PCR testing detects virus material or any pathogen material or any genetic material, it doesn't give you any information on if it is viable or not. Matter of fact, you may have a key into viability based on the low cycle threshold that picks up a lot of it. You can say, okay, great, something is going on here. But it doesn't tell you if it's alive or dead, or just something that's still there that's waiting to be cleared out of your body that's dead. All right, to do that, you'd have to do a lab culture, which is why the man who developed PCR testing actually said, hey, don't use it for that. All right, it has its application, but to use as a gold standard to say someone is infective, all right, is not good, because it doesn't test to say, hey, is this person, even though they have a bits of genetic material, is it viable or is it just dead? All right. So when you come out and you say, oh, I have it, is that really so? But not regardless, what has that done to the world? We have had spikes in cases all over the place because we're using a lot of PCR testing. So that's a little bit on the PCR. That's number two, something that I would encourage any government official, decision makers to rethink. And I believe they will have to do so as Omicron becomes endemic. And people who are home asymptomatic are able to work, but because they've come into some contact with somebody, they're home, or all these things. Is it really the best way to approach things? All right. Another thing is masks. Cloth masks actually make it more likely for you to develop bacterial pneumonia. The average person doesn't even know how to care for their masks. I've seen some masks on the streets. I'm like, oh my God. The thing is so dirty, all right? And you just drag it off and you always have your hands on it and all these things, and you're breathing through a cloth mask, breathing in dirt, and you're breathing, and for some persons, the oral health is not so great. and they have to, be talking and breathing back that in. So, bacterial pneumonia becomes a real threat. The blue surgical masks are actually not intended to filter anything. They're actually just splash guards. So if you're doing surgery, if you work in a situation where, you generate or you load up a sneeze, or, you're speaking, you want to be respectful of that area. And that area may be the open part of someone's body as well. So that's a splash guard. And if you've been wearing that blue mask, if you laugh and you feel the wetness on your lips, you're like, yeah, that's what it is. It's a splash guard, okay? But don't think that it is an actual good treatment against filtration, all right? Because the average person doesn't even have an N95 mask. All right, this thing about asymptomatic spread, you want to stay tuned in for that. I think that's the last paper that I will review tonight, a paper on asymptomatic spread, which has fueled lockdowns all over the place. Thank God in Jamaica, they said not going to lock down anymore. But we have to still be responsible with how we carry out our daily lives, okay? But nevertheless, what has fueled lockdowns? Asymptomatic spread. To say, hey, you can spread this thing even though you are not really ill. You're like, hey, I'm okay, Jack. I didn't even develop a fever, but they swab me and I have something there. I don't know how. Oh, you're asymptomatic, stay home, all right? And what has that done to the economy? We'll see too. So stay tuned for that one. Okay, I apologize for that break in transmission just about now. I hope that you can still hear me. You can let me know if you're still hearing properly. All right, another thing that came out is that no treatments were available. People said, hey, stay home. Don't come here until you're really sick. And that a lot of health professionals all over the world, movers and shakers in the health field, are saying many lives that could have been saved have been lost because we did not activate early at-home treatment. So at first you laugh at something, but then it becomes self-evident that that is the way out of the pandemic. Early at-home treatment. And how many lives have been lost? And one of the biggest persons who talks about this is Dr. Peter McCullough. He and his colleagues actually developed a system that showed what a treatment could be. Here it is on the screen. This is at-home outpatient, not in hospital treatment. All right, because when someone comes to you already, this thing has gained a momentum. All right, and then you put them on a ventilator and all these things, and for a lot of them, they didn't survive. But if early at-home treatment could be activated, then a lot of persons could be saved. Tonight, right before we end, we're gonna share with you what is like a kit of some of the things that you should have. I don't also want to share with you these scientific studies and you go home. I want you to be empowered also to know that there's something you can do while at home as soon as you have the first symptom as a person or someone else notices something as a sign. You want to start these things, put them into motion so that you can stand a very good chance, all right? Because you have replication, inflammation, and the last stage is what we call malcoagulation, where there's clotting issues, and that's what takes out people, a lot of blood clots, all right? And yeah, another thing, so there was, no treatments, just wait on the rollout of the gold standard called the vaccines. And we're saying that, this disease is very amenable to treatment. Many doctors in Jamaica wanted to use certain treatments and they were blocked by governments. In the United States, people have to be writing to courts. Listen, you can't do worse than dead. A doctor can't do worse than dead. So if a doctor is moved to try something to save a life, who is a government official to stand in the way? I think governments should let doctors do what they're trained to do. Step aside and allow doctors to flex their muscle. Whether they want to use multi-drug treatment, whether they want to use nutraceuticals, step aside and allow them to treat their patients and allow them to save lives because that's what they were trained to do. All right, so yeah, that was one of the things, just wait on it. But when it came, it was non-neutralizing. You found out that you didn't become a full stop, as Dr. Fauci said, but you could still get it and pass it on. You're like, if this was any other product, you would call with the person and say, you told me the product would do this, I didn't do that. So what's going on here, boss? And you would bring back the product and say, I want my money back. It didn't do what you said it would do. But it's a treatment called a vaccine, so it escapes that. Here's another thing: no natural immunity. The tight-lipped unnatural immunity not only discounted it, but also just totally disregarded it and said it doesn't exist. You even have government officials saying natural immunity doesn't exist, not knowing that if you impugn or talk down natural immunity, you, by extent, speak down also on vaccinal immunity. Because vaccinal immunity, in a way, tries to mimic what your body would naturally do. It kickstart what? Your immunity. That's what it tries to do. All right. So that's the other thing. You're saying, hey, I had it and I've recovered. Don't pay any mind. Go and get it anyway. Is that even following the science? We'll see in a little bit. All right. So that's what I wanted to share. And I'll now get into some of the papers with you. I hope just some of those things alone were, was informative to you and that you can now take and build your research on. Listen, you don't have to be a medical professional to know at least the general basics of some things. I believe every one of us should be generally informed in the care of our bodies. Unfortunately, we're not. All right, people trust their souls to the pastor and trust their bodies to the doctor so that they don't have to take any care in it. They're like, hey, pastor, just tell me what to believe, man. I can't bother to read this Bible. And doctor, just tell me what to take. I just can't bother to care for my body. That has got to stop. You have to take full responsibility on both those fronts. There's a Bible for you to read and there's a body for you to care for. It is yours. So there's this thing that says, hey, stay in your lane, man. Stay in your lane. Allow the specialists to do their thing. Who are you? Stay in your lane. And that's some form of censorship. And we want to speak out against that because as human beings, we talk about every subject. We talk about the weather. I'm not a meteorologist. We talk about all these things. But by nature, we are generalists on many subjects and specialists on one or two. That's how we are as human beings. All right. So that's how God made us. And that's who we are. So why fight against that nature? But then you have specialists who are specialized in every area. But not because you're not from an area means you can't speak on it. Because sometimes we find that in a certain field, the methods of training have become compromised by those who have the money. So to then say, hey, you must be trained this way to make evaluations is further perpetuating that, what you would call that bad state or that state of being compromised. Make sense? So a lot of things, Leonardo da Vinci, greatest anatomical artist of all time, was an artist. All right, so many things come from people who are outside. All right, so I hope that makes sense. Let's get into some studies and you can just take a little break, grab your water, and these studies are going to be made available to you too. All right, so let me share again my screen and get into some of them with you. All right. All right, so the first one we want to look at is this one here that you see on the screen. All right. And it came out in the European Journal of Epidemiology. Here you have the docket number and everything that you can actually search. And it was a correspondence. And the title is Increases in COVID-19 are unrelated to levels of vaccination across 68 countries and 2,947 counties in the United States. Now, as I said, I didn't do these things, but I'm giving you information that you probably wouldn't have. All right. So I'm going to read a couple of things about it. They said here in the second sentence right here, it says, for instance, the narrative related to the ongoing surge of new cases in the United States is argued to be driven by areas with low vaccination rates. Isn't that so? You say, hey, they're catching it over there because they have low vaccination. When Jamaica had less than double figures of vaccination, you had TVJ News coming in and say that 99% is persons showing up is unvaccinated. Well, that was to be expected. In any area where you have a low agreement or a low take up of a certain treatment, then people who show up more than likely are going to be of that mass number, okay? And if the tables were turned, it's the same thing. 99% of persons would be on the other side. It's just an issue of dispersion or representation of numbers, nothing more. All right, but let's get back to this study. It says here, we investigate the relationship between the percentage of population fully vaccinated and new COVID-19 cases across 68 countries and across 2,947 counties in the United States. So they're trying to see what is the relationship between vaccination or non-vaccination and COVID-19 spread. That's what they're trying to see. Make sense? It's a worthy study. All right, and I'll just go to their findings. And they said, at the country level, there appears to be no discernible relationship between percentage of population fully vaxxed and new COVID-19 cases in the last 7 days. All right, so no relation. But let's go on. In fact, the trend line suggests a marginally positive association such that countries with higher percentage of population fully vaxxed have higher COVID-19 cases per 1 million people. So quite the contrary is what they're finding. Notably, they cite Israel, with over 60% of their population fully vaccinated, had the highest COVID-19 cases per 1 million people in the last 7 days. You wouldn't have expected so, right? You would expect that these vaccinations would drive down it, but they're saying there seems to be like a lockstep, approach that once you ramp up your vaccination, you also ramp up new COVID-19 cases. That's what they're seeing. So they say the lack of meaningful association between percentage of population fully vaxxed and new COVID-19 cases is further exemplified, for instance, by the comparison of Iceland and Portugal. Let's see what they're saying. Both countries have over 75% of their population fully vaccinated and have more COVID-19 cases per 1 million than countries such as Vietnam and South Africa that have around 10% of their population fully vaccinated. I'm wondering why. So they're saying this is something that we should look at, and there you have some graphs. All right, and they actually go into it and give you some more examples. So I want to go to the interpretation and the final thing that they actually said in the summary. All right, because you can get this, and I'm going to include my highlights so that you can read through it for yourself as well. All right, so let's go to the final here in green. It says, in summary, even as efforts should be made to encourage populations to get vaccinated, it should be done so with humility and respect. Stigmatizing populations can do more harm than good. Importantly, other non-pharmacological prevention methods, such as basic public health hygiene with regards to maintaining safe distance, hand washing, promoting better, frequent, and cheaper forms of testing, needs to be renewed in order to strike the balance of learning to live with COVID-19 in the same manner we continue to live 100 years later with the various seasonal alterations of the 1918 influenza virus. So you get what they're saying. They're saying what you expect, or what we expected to see with high levels of vaccination cutting down the spread, is not what they're seeing. All right, and they actually go through and show you countries and what they're returning as their results. This one for me was wow. I'm like, really? Because we all think that it's the opposite. We're like, let's get the numbers up. And when we get the numbers up, we shall be okay, Jack. But it's not so. And then the narrative has changed to say, okay, maybe that's not the case, but you won't go into the hospital. All right. Well, at least we understand what it does. All right. That is a good thing. All right. So let's go on to the next study. I hope that you understand this one. I cannot see the chat if there are any questions on it or so, but I'll take a look at that in a little bit. All right. Let me see if I can do so. So now. Great. Everyone is tuning in. No questions so far. I guess we're all on the same wavelength, understanding what we're presenting here. All right, that's awesome. So let's go on. We have 9 more studies to present, and then just some more, and then we'll be out of here. All right. Nice, quick, and short so that you can understand these things. All right, so the next study I want to talk about is just there was some doctors in the United States that actually came out with this. I hope you're seeing it on your screen. And many of these doctors are experts in their field. There are some of their names. All right, you can see. So this is not just some guy who is, living in it with his mom in a basement under some weird name, just making up conspiracy theories, making up rumors. These are actually doctors who spent years. And today I'm just a messenger. I don't need to be an expert like these guys to share this information with you because it's there in the public domain. And sometimes the best place to hide something is in a book, unfortunately, or in the wide open. All right, so the title of it is SARS-CoV-2 Mass Vaccination, Urgent Questions on Vaccine Safety that Demand Answers from International Health Agencies, Regulatory Authorities, Governments, and Vaccine Developers. So they're calling up these guys and they're saying, hey, we have urgent questions for you to answer. All right, this is not just gonna go down like this. These are urgent questions that based on our training as scientists, as doctors, you will have to answer. All right, so we'll send this one to you too, so that you can actually go through it. It's actually long, so I wouldn't put you through that right now, but they go through some of the things that they actually are asking about the lack of thorough testing in animals prior to the clinical trials, because you first do something in vitro, and you first do it theoretically in your head. You're like, that should work. Some people even do it what we call in silico on a computer. And you're saying, hey, this should work. Okay, it should work. Let's try it in a test tube. Great, in vitro. Awesome, it works. Well, let's try it now in vivo, which is in animals. All right, so you have steps to go through. And people are saying, hey, because of what was happening, we had to skip certain steps. All right, we need to remember history. All right, and in history, you have a lady called Frances Oldham Kelsey. I don't know if you know about that lady, but she even received a President's Award for what she did. And if you know about history with thalidomide and how thalidomide was given for morning sickness for many women who had were pregnant. And what happened is that the German company rolled that out and people were taking it up, millions of sales, and it came to the United States. But this woman that I just called Frances actually worked with the United States government, actually with the FDA, as someone who would pass off, and she said, hey, just hold it. I know everybody is jumping up about this, but just hold it. And what happened is that all those babies, or most of them, born with limbs and they were born deformed and so on. And she was the one who they say saved America, saved a generation from those things. Read up on her, Frances Kelsey. Read up on her. Learn history. I realize that if we don't know history, we are very prone to repeat it. All right. So what they're saying here, okay, I was saying in vivo, and then you can go on to clinical trials. And certain persons you must exclude from clinical trials, except that they tell you. But pregnant women, for example, and in none of these you have pregnant women in any of their clinical trials, yet still they're telling you to give it to pregnant people. Pregnant people are two persons. All right. So in medicine, you never want to really touch pregnant people at first. All right. So they said that lack of thorough testing in animals prior to clinical trials and authorization based on safety data generated during trials that lasted less than 3.5 months. They're like, come on, raise questions regarding vaccine safety. That's there in yellow. All right. So here's another one. The recently identified role of SARS-CoV-2 spike in inducing endothelial damage, characteristic of COVID-19, even in absence of infection, is extremely relevant given that most of the authorized vaccine induce endogenous production of spike. Makes sense? It causes their body to make spike, but they're saying, hey, this spike looks to be in itself damaging. Many people who show up, they're just in many few days hence have higher troponin levels, and they're like, what's going on there? And it shows that the heart is under stress. And I think it's already accepted that that may be something. So there are many things here that they actually cite. One of them is in blue. I'm not going to read them all tonight because this is an extensive study that you can grab and read it for yourself and share it with your primary care physician, share it with anyone who is in some leadership position, and say, hey, what do you think about this? It says here in blue, given the high rate of occurrence of adverse effects that have been reported to date, as well as the potential for vaccine-driven disease enhancement, Th2 immunopathology, autoimmunity, and immune evasion, there is need for a better understanding of the benefits and the risks of mass vaccination. There's a difference between vaccination and mass vaccination, particularly in groups excluded from clinical trials. Earlier on, I told you that they didn't involve pregnant women in the clinical trials, nor children. Make sense? So these groups, you handle them differently, but yet still they were excluded from the clinical trial, yet they're told that, hey, they should just get it because it's safe and effective for all. And these doctors, scientists, specialists in their field are saying, hey, we're calling you guys, vaccine developers, decision makers in government, we're calling you to let us have this talk. And that's what this was about, this paper that came out. And so many more things that they talked about. And I'm just at the introduction. I'm not going to go through it all with you. If I do, I'm sure some of you will fall asleep tonight because you've probably had a hard day. But if you're interested in these things, if you want, remember to put your email address in the chat so you can get these information. All right. Okay, so I'm going to skip on from this one to talk about all of those phases that I talked about. They talk about them here in detail, such as phase 3 cryo exclusion criteria. All right, so we know phase 1 and 2 were actually done together, and phase 3 as a trial was never done. Phase 3 is what's going on now. You're either in the treatment group or in the control group. All right, all of us are actually a part of the greatest phase 3 trial ever conducted on humanity. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go on from this one. So we've dealt with 2 so far, and I want to go on to another one. And this one shocked me. And then this is also old news because you already know this or should know this. All right. And the title of this one says, so what it says here, it says it's a large-scale study of antibody titer decay. I was actually looking if this one became peer-reviewed as yet, but it still is in this phase. But I believe because of the large data set that they use, definitely it's going to pass that. But we don't wait on that. If the study seems to make sense and if you can go through it yourself, great. All right. But you want to see what's going on out there, especially for studies that have a large data set. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands or even million. All right. So this is a large play study to display the kinetics of the SARS-CoV-2 antibodies present in individuals vaccinated with 2 doses versus unvaccinated individuals who recover from the disease. Make sense? So they're looking at their antibodies that you produce. Remember, vaccinal immunity is not the same as natural immunity. The kinetics and how it happens is much different. All right. And that's why you have persons who are saying, hey, I'm not so certain because if I give you this, then I hand over the way my immune system works to you and to your genius and to your mindset at that time, and I'm not so certain about that. Well, some people are saying, hey, I need to be protected, so I'll go ahead with it. They feel that way, and that's their decision to make. All right, so they want to look at these things. So here's the objective: to determine the kinetics of these 2 types of antibody generation. So here are the results. They noted that there was higher level of antibodies in vaccinated individuals after the 2nd dose than in people who recovered from the disease. That's what's being said there in yellow. So they're like, hey, we noticed that after 2 weeks, they actually had more antibodies than the persons who naturally got the disease, that is, and recovered. However, let's look what it says in orange. It says, in vaccinated subjects, antibody titers decrease by up to 40%. Titers, let's use levels. So antibody levels decrease by up to 40% each subsequent month. While in individuals who recovered from the disease, they decrease by less than 5% each month. I hope you got that. Wow. Like, man, these guys must be kidding. How did this study even come out? Is this for real? And it was. So they're saying 40% reduction in vaccinated levels, 40% reduction of their antibody levels versus 5% on a monthly basis for people who naturally got the disease. Wow, so different. way different. All right. So that's what they found there. I'm not going to read it all, but it says here the conclusion. This study demonstrates that individuals who receive the Pfizer vaccine had different kinetics of antibody levels compared to patients who had been infected with the disease or with the virus. Let's say that with higher initial levels, but as much faster exponential decrease in the first group. In other words, we've heard Ms. Walensky, who is one of the big heads in the CDC, come out and say that it's like a 3 to 6 months that, so it says 3 to 6 months lease on life. And after that 3 to 6 months, you got to receive a booster is what they're saying. And I'm like, why would somebody throw their product under the bus like that? But it kind of makes sense if you want to bring in the boosters. Okay, so some of you on here have received the dose, I'm sure. All right. Whether you want to go ahead now and get your boosters, you should really become informed on that. It's a big decision to make. You want to become informed on that. Some of us have not received, and you also want to remain informed on that and how you can keep yourself healthy. All right, so I just want to talk about one more thing that this study shows. I know I have it here. I went through it all, and these things, you get the hang of it after you start to read them. And it says it over again. I don't need to go through it anymore, all right? But it said in vaccinated population, we observe higher initial antibody titers, but with each passing month, 40% decrease. While in the naturally recovered persons, the titers, decreased about 4 or 5% each month, all right? So that's what they said right there. And it's there for you to see. Now they talk about the strength of their study is that it provides such information in a relatively large cohort of both vaccinated and individuals and patients who recovered from SARS-CoV-2. It shows that the declining slope of antibodies in vaccinated individuals is much steeper than in convalescent individuals. Other studies report on the persistence of the humoral response in vaccinated subjects, but follow-up of the participants were usually below 3 months, all right? And then they talk about the limitations of the study. I love when they do that. All right. So you want to know that. You want to know what you get yourself into and what you can expect from that. Make sense? So I hope we're on the same page so far. So we've been through 3 studies. I hope you're not losing your stamina on this, because you need to know these things so that you can make informed decisions for yourself. You can pass on great information to people that you love. And it's not you. You can cite this and say, hey, they did this. And they actually had a large data set. Actually here, let's see what this is. Right, they actually tell you the amount of persons always that are involved in the study, okay? They always tell you that. And there we go, a total of 2,653 individuals, all right? And 4,361 people who got better. So these together, that's about 7,000 persons in this data. It's not 100. Come on, 100 is too small. When you were in school and they say you're doing a sample, and if your sample is too small of the representative population, they disqualify your research. Kind of similar, all right? But I'm gonna reveal one of these studies tonight that had over 1 million persons. Wow, and that was so big. All right, so let's go on to the fourth one. I'm not going to take a lot of time with this one, but just to show a couple things. What I want to show in this one here on the screen is that I don't believe that people understand that there's a difference between humoral immunity or systemic and mucosal immunity that resides in your nasopharynx, okay? I remember someone said, hey, Kenny, you need to watch this movie that is called Contagion. I'm like, come on, man, I don't watch movies. But I said, all right, let me give it a watch. And even though I slept through half of it, I saw the part where they actually got this vaccine made. And guess how they administered the vaccine? In the nose. In other words, it was what we call, not a humoral, all right, but a mucosal vaccine, all right? Because where does the virus interact first? It's spread to your nasopharynx. Of course. Where do they swab when you go in for testing? The exact same place. Why? Because that's where you get it. All right. So if you, and there are studies and there are people all over the world who are saying, why did we create humoral vaccines for this? Why didn't we go and create mucosal vaccines instead? So someone can receive something in their system, but they can still catch it in their nasopharynx. Because what you will see in this study here is that they are very compartmentalized. All right. So meaning you can have one type of immunity and not have the other. I hope that makes sense. All right. So I just want to read this part here in blue. It says, while information on systemic immunity to SARS-CoV-2 is rapidly accruing, considerable uncertainty still surrounds the role of mucosal immunity to the virus within the respiratory tract, the primary site of the SARS-CoV-2 infection and replication. Makes sense? I just explained that to you. It says here, because immune responses can exhibit striking compartmentalization, mucosal immunity induced by natural infection and candidate vaccine administered parentally may be quite divergent. Okay, so what you're going to get from a vaccine and what you're going to get from something that you actually get through your nasopharynx versus being parentally into your muscle is different, is what they're saying here. And people need to know that. While it appears that strong systemic antibodies responses can protect against reduced infection in the lower respiratory tract animals, it may be that antibodies in the upper respiratory tract are needed to substantially limit virus replication at this site. So upper respiratory tract is your trachea coming up to your nasopharynx. So they're saying this is the area that we should really work on, all right? And not only lower respiratory tract, body. All right, so I hope that is making some sense. So 40 says, these observations suggest that strategies to prevent the SARS-CoV-2 infection will benefit from effective induction of not only robust systemic immunity, but also functional mucosal immunity to prevent or limit infection at the portal of entry. Thus, robust pre-existing or induced mucosal immunity could reduce the risk of transmission within the community by decreasing the level or duration of viral shedding from infected individuals, okay? So people are saying just this is the way, but they don't understand, and they're like, why is it that we still have the spread? But you would have the spread if mucosal immunity is not generated, all right? You may not get systemically ill, but you're gonna have spread. And people need to know that probably until Omicron does this thing, or they develop some mucosal, you're gonna have spread. But should we be, looking so much at morbidity versus, pathogenicity, how it makes you sick, especially seeing that everybody at some point will get the Omicron variant or strain. It's actually a strain. All right. So let's move on to the next one. There's another one that talked about similar viral loads. Similar viral loads, whether you're vaccinated or not. I'm going to send this one to you. And that's what they're saying, that it doesn't matter. Once you're infected or not, you carry similar viral loads in your nasopharynx. That's what they found in this study. All right. I'm not going to belabor the point on this one. You know that what I'm saying is so. I'm not going to tell you something that I can't back up by the study. All right. That's what the study is saying. All right. So let's move on with the next one here. This one was a big shocker to me, though. And this one shows that, here it goes. So taking a deep breath, it says an infectivity enhancing site on the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein is targeted by antibodies. It's not so complicated, it's fine. Listen to it. So there's an infectivity enhancing site on the virus that if you open it, it gets more infective. However, the antibodies that are induced by the vaccine, and this is in a small amount of persons, they realized it so far, the antibodies from the vaccines actually target this infectivity enhancing site and opens it up. So not because you can make certain antibodies mean you should make them. All right, so there's more to the whole picture. Okay, you got antibodies, you're okay. But if the antibodies are interacting with a certain part of the virus therefore making it more effective, don't we have a big problem? Here we go. Let's read in the highlighted portion here. It says, here we screened a series of anti-spike monoclonal antibodies from coronavirus patients and found that some of the antibodies against the N-terminal domain induce the open conformation of the receptor binding domain, and thus enhance the binding capacity of the spike protein to ACE2 and effectivity of the SARS-CoV-2. Wow, that's really happening. All right, so when I learned about this, I went and I saw that it comparatively so far, it is in a small subset of persons that this happens. But what happens is that they get very ill. These people become very ill in the hospital and they're wondering, what's going on? Why can't they get better? It is because, you know, and they call it breakthrough cases, but they're very violent breakthrough cases because the actual antibodies that are made over the 2-week period actually target that infectivity site and opens it up and makes the virus and its buddies quicker to take over your system. All right, so I hope that makes sense. And the fight is harder right there. All right, so far I think we've been through 6, so we only have 4 more to go. Here's another one. This one is very small. It says here, let's see if I can grab it. Yeah, so it came out in the Lancet Regional Health, Europe. Okay, so for those who know about medical journals, you have medical journals and then you have medical journals. Okay, the Lancet is one of those top respected medical journals. British Medical Journal, Nature as well is very well respected. All right, so here is the Lancet Regional Health report. And here's the title. I hope you understand the title, but I'll read it and go through it a little bit. It says here, the epidemiological relevance of the COVID-19 vaccinated population is increasing. All right, so there are many things that happen in our world, diseases that spread from people to people. But if it's not happening on a large scale, we say that it's not epidemiologically significant. All right, it's not of such epidemiological significance that we need to note it. It's probably just going to happen and phase out and we move on with life. But when something you say now is epidemiologically relevant or significant, it means that it's happening on a large scale. So what's happening on a large scale here? Well, the ability of cross infection from people who have been vaccinated. And so if you're vaccinated tonight, you still need to protect yourself. Act as if you didn't receive anything and still go ahead and boost your immunity. Take the kit that I've been talking about at the end, talk with your doctor, have them close in your corner, and make sure that you are not just saying, I got it and I move on with life. Because what this is showing now is that between infection between vaccinated persons is increasing to such a level that we need to take note of this epidemiological phenomenon. All right, so I hope that's making sense so far. So the problem is increasing. Here we go. It says high COVID-19 vaccination rates were expected to reduce transmission of SARS-CoV-2 in populations by reducing the number of possible sources for transmission and thereby reduce the burden of COVID-19 disease. That's what we all expected. Well, most people expected that. They're like, yay, this thing is going to be the thing that stops everything and we move on with life. But so even though we expect, was our expectations realized? Well, we move on here. It says, you read this, it's like 2 pages. Okay, so this one will be very easy for most persons to go through. And I won't go through it all, but basically they tell you how a vaccinated person can sometimes be the cause of the spread. Quite different from what we're hearing out there. You will never hear this on your regular news because it wouldn't make sense. It would be counterproductive to what our government is trying to achieve, which I'm not so certain. This is my personal statement now. All right, I'm waving this and saying it's my personal. I'm not so certain it's about health alone, right? And I'm not saying anyone is evil, but I think that they have greater perspective of other issues that come into the whole picture than the average person out there who says, listen, not for me. So in activating their agencies of the media and many other arms, they have to do it. They have to do what they must do, short of mandating it. Okay, they must do what they must do. And in a sense, I don't even fault many of them because Jamaica is heavily indebted. So many things are happening here, but you also have a decision to make because you have bodily autonomy over this temple, whether you believe God gave it to you or not. It's a body that you are given care of. You do not own it, but He gives you stewardship of your body. All right. So ending their statement, they said many decision makers assume that the vaccinated can be excluded as a source of transmission. I want to read that so you understand what's going on. So you come into a place, you say, hey, are you vaccinated? All right, go back to work. You're good. Are you vaccinated? No. Well, you got to stay home until you are. What fuels that kind of thinking? It is that a vaccinated person cannot be a source of transmission. As I said, we're following the science. And you want to take this and say, hey, I know, bossy, what you're saying, but look at this. Let's talk. Is what you're saying, well, maybe your boss doesn't care about the science. Maybe he just cares about what, government says. But if you have any link to anyone up there, talk with them and say, hey, have you seen this? What do you think about it? Can we discount it or disregard that paper as if it didn't happen? Is it that what they're seeing, we should probably just throw caution to the wind and just continue with a certain narrative? Let's read it. So it says, many decision makers assume that the vaccinated can be excluded as a source of transmission. It appears to be grossly negligent to ignore the vaccinated population as a possible and relevant source of transmission when deciding about public health control measures. And that makes sense. It makes absolute sense because that's what happened in Barnstable, Massachusetts. For those who were at our first following the science, you remember Barnstable, Massachusetts, what happens there? They were saying, hey, go and hug people now. And you had pictures of people tears streaming down their eyes saying, these vaccines have made it possible for us to be together again. I think I have one of those pictures here, and the song was being sung, someday we'll be together. And they're saying, amen. And it was so emotional. But then what happened in Barnstable, Massachusetts, following the July 4th celebrations was that there was a mass breakout, whether they were most 74% of the persons there were actually vaccinated. And then Fauci came on and said, slap on about those diapers on your face, man. It's not as we thought. All right. So, of course, what this is saying here is in line with what happened in Barnstable, Massachusetts back there in 2021, in July 4, which came out in the August 6th weekly morbidity and mortality report of the CDC. You can look up these things. All right. So that's what this paper shows, that the epidemiological significance of the vaccinated population is actually increasing. We don't know how much it will go, but it's increasing. All right. So we have 3 more, I guess, to share with you. I must share this with you. It's not really a study, but it was an abstract warning that came out. So I'm going to close my screen here because I have this in picture form to share with you. All right. But this was an abstract study that came out from the American Heart Association. And the American Heart Association gave a warning and said, hey, this thing is causing certain issues, we believe. So I want to share it with you, what they said. And I discovered this just the other day. So this was what they said initially. No, look at this. No, that's not it. Let me get it back for you. Don't lose it. Here we go. This is it right here. All right. So it's free access. So it says abstract 10712, mRNA COVID vaccines dramatically increase endothelial inflammatory markers and ACS risk as measured by the pulse cardiac test. So the pulse cardiac test, cardiologists would know about this. It gives you biomarkers of when somebody's actually could have a heart attack soon. All right, so biomarkers are things that tell you what may happen soon that the person is not feeling any symptoms for, but they have biomarkers, and the pulse cardiac test is one of those things that give you an insight into what may happen very soon. So this one was written by Stephen R. Grundy, And it says mRNA COVID vaccines dramatically increase in the filial inflammatory markers and ACS risk as measured by pulse cardiac test, a warning. And they go through it. I'm not going to go through it here. It's very, you can actually type this in, but you won't find that. This was what was amazing for me. I'm going to share something with you. Hang on. No, when you try to find this, you will not find it anymore. This is what you will find. And you actually find where they went through and told you that they had to change it. The author had to change it. And this is what it now says. Remember what I just read to you. No, this is what it just said. It now says. So they couldn't remove it because it was true, but they had to reword a lot of things. And here is what it now says. Observational findings of post-cardiac test, findings for inflammatory markers in patient received mRNA vaccine. When you go through the whole thing, the average person reading this, they're like, what's going on there? All right. So it doesn't say it so clearly. So they had to change it up a little bit. And, there could be many reasons for that, but nevertheless, it's there. Like, whoa, why did they have to change it so much? The whole paper, the whole warning or abstract, has been changed. Amazing. You don't believe me? Go and check it out yourself. I'm so happy that I screenshot the first one. So I just had it here to share with you. So this is the second. I'm going to share the first one again, because when I went back on the site to get it, I couldn't get it. I'm like, hold on, that's not what it said initially. Here's what it said initially. It said it straight so that anybody out there could get it and understand it. But no, it doesn't say it anymore. This is something that is factual, found, so you can check it out yourself. All right, so let's move on. I want to share something with you here, because just in case, when I talk to some persons and I'm very calm about it, but I find that some people are irritated, and I don't know why. And they say that, yeah, be careful of the idiot there, them come with listen. No, I want to share something with you. From what I've been sharing this evening, you see that these people aren't idiots. It's the other side of the coin. And I believe what needs to happen is that we need to come to the table, and robust discussion and exchange needs to happen. But somehow it's not happening, because that's how teams of specialists should be working together, and saying, hey, how can we best do this? A team at home treatment, a team here in hospital treatment, and they can be working together and come up with good findings. I want to share my screen with you here, and I hope share audio is on. Great. So let me now grab Chrome. I want to share this with you. So you won't find this on YouTube really so much. I hope you're hearing the audio, by the way.
Stephen Gundy's paper in circulation. And also anecdotal evidence. I mean, I have a lot of interaction with the cardiology across the UK. And anecdotally, I've been getting told by colleagues that they are seeing younger and younger people coming with heart attacks. Now, what does this mean in terms of the data? We have to put the jigsaw piece together. We know since July there's been almost 10,000 excess non-COVID deaths. And most of those, or significant proportion of those, have been caused by circulation or heart attack and stroke. There's been a 30% increase in people dying at home. And often these are because of cardiac arrest. Of course, this is also something close to my heart, because my own father is one of those statistics. He had a cardiac arrest at home July the 26th. So when this figure, this data, since this data has been collected. So where do we go from here? I think the signal is quite strong. I personally think that this needs investigating. So I think the Joint Committee of Vaccines and Immunization should absolutely investigate this. I think that the researchers, I really hope that they take a look in the mirror and realize the ones from where the whistleblowers come from, that they realize that they should publish this stuff, because their duty primarily is to patients, not the interests of the drug industry. And I think the third thing, and this has been a discussion that's been ongoing, I think now it's high time that policymakers around the world put an end to the mandates, because I think if this signal is strong and if it's correct, then history will not be on their side, and the public will not forgive them for it, Alex. So this is very concerning. It needs investigating, and hopefully it can be resolved very soon.
Okay, So I hope you were able to hear. I hope it wasn't too botchy for you to watch. But basically, he raised some points, and that's a consultant cardiologist, by the way. Not just some guy in his parents' basement, just making up things under a weird moniker or nickname, and just saying things that are unfounded, rumors and what do you call it? Conspiracy theories. These are people who are scientists, doctors who are saying, hey, we probably need to look at this. Can we draw some breaks a little bit? Can we change mandates? Can we change the narrative? Could we be a little bit more wider in our perspective and approach? Of course. So here we go. He said that you have 10,000 excess non-COVID deaths, and mainly they are circulatory cause. Why would you have 10,000? He's saying that this is something that we need to look into. All right, so that was something that I wanted to share with you. All right, so I'm gonna get into this one that I promised you that I would. Oh, okay. I have a low power mode here. Let me change this up. How would I? Hang on a second. Let me change up something, just a moment. Okay, we're good to go again. Okay, remember earlier on I told that we're going to talk about asymptomatic spread. And here's a certain paper that was published, which was so big. And we're going to talk about Omicron to end off tonight. Okay, so hang in there. We're coming up, but we're going to talk about Omicron so that we all can be informed where that is concerned. So here is a study, and this study is called Nature Communications, by the way, published this one. It's called, and this is peer reviewed, by the way. It's post-lockdown SARS-CoV-2 nucleic acid screening in nearly 10 million residents of Wuhan, China. No, we're not talking about 1 million, 10 million residents of Wuhan, China. So they looked at what was happening, and it's a post-lockdown nucleic acid screening. And it was really to find out a couple of things. One of the things that I saw, and I'm going to read this to you. I want you to stay keen and sharp on this one now. The screening of 9,865,404 participants without a history of COVID-19 found no newly confirmed COVID-19 cases and identified 300 asymptomatic positive cases with a detection rate of blah, blah, blah. Okay. So they have a median detection rate right there. All right. So let's go on here. I hope you understand what that's saying. So they had 9 million plus persons who didn't have a history of COVID-19, but they found no newly confirmed cases. But among those 9 million, they found just 300. All right, so it was less than 1% persons who were actually asymptomatically positive. I was asymptomatically positive in 2020. Yeah, so you don't have any symptoms at all, but they swabbed you and they found something and they sent you home, okay? So they said, of the 300, now follow me on this, of the 300 asymptomatic positive cases, 2 cases came from one family and another 2 were from another family. There were no previously confirmed COVID-19 patients in these 2 families. So like, they're the only ones. So a total of 1,174 close contacts of the asymptomatic positive cases were traced. So they went to contact tracing and they traced down 1,174 people and they all tested negative for COVID-19. Remember, we're talking about asymptomatic spread. These people are asymptomatic, but let's track down people that they were around. And both the family, nobody had it in the family that they were around. And not only that, of the 1,174 persons that we tracked down, all of them were actually still negative. That's weird. So they said virus cultures were negative for all asymptomatic positive and repositive cases, indicating no viable virus. Remember that we talked about viable virus earlier on, when we talked about the PCR testing, being able to detect material, but not being able to detect if the genetic material that it detected is viable. You would have to do culture. So let's read it over again. Virus cultures were negative for all asymptomatic positive and repositive cases. So the asymptomatic positive person and the person who came back a second time with a nasal swab and say, hey, you're positive again according to the PCR test, they said, hey, let's take it a next step further and let's do virus cultures. Remember, I told you earlier on that your PCR test doesn't necessarily show that you are positive. You really are COVID positive, or not a COVID, but a SARS-CoV-2 positive person. You have to do virus culture. So that's what they did here. They took these positive results of asymptomatic and repositive persons and did viable virus cultures and found no viable virus in that study. All asymptomatic positive cases, repositive cases, and their close contacts were isolated for 2 weeks until the results of nucleic acid testing were negative. None of the detected positive cases or their close contacts became symptomatic or newly confirmed with COVID-19 during the isolation period. So nobody got ill. Once again, there's a difference between SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. You can be a carrier of something, but you don't necessarily come down with or develop the disease. All right, so I hope this one here, and it's a big study. I'm gonna send it to you, you can read it, over almost 10 million persons. All right, that's why it was so quickly peer reviewed, by the way, but it's a big one, okay? And shows you that this thing about asymptomatic spread, is it really so? What is this showing? And of course, there are many persons who came out and said, well, we need to say something about this study, but how can you talk about something with 10 million persons? You just kind of have to bow out and accept that, you know. All right, let's see if we can argue with the way they designed or did the study. But to date, no one has withdrew this. So what does it show for you and me? This thing about asymptomatic spread, in my own words, I would say is a fantasy. Or if it does happen, it happens on such a small scale that it is epidemiologically insignificant. Okay. All right. So let's go into one last one. I wonder which one I'll share with you for the last one. All right. But I want to go into this one here, talking about Omicron. So we can end off on that here. We had one about masks, but we don't have to go there. I think we understand where mask is. You have to know how to wear a mask, and you have to know what a mask does. And there's a Danish mask study. You can type it in on Google Scholar, Danish mask study, and see if you get something. I may just send it to you as an extra so that you can read that for yourself, okay? All right, so the last one here I want to talk about is the Omicron variant. So the Omicron, what do we know so far? I'm having here on the screen the CDC's morbidity and mortality weekly report of December 1 to 8. Okay, so every week the CDC puts out something for the public to read, for healthcare providers, for decision makers to make use of. So what we know about Omicron so far, it is the most heavily mutated strain of COVID-19, okay? It has actually found a way to break through natural and vaccinated immunity. So even if you've had the disease and you've come back from it, you can still be infected with the Omicron strain. What they're also finding is that you don't become sick from it, okay? So you won't develop a very harsh COVID-19 from that. Matter of fact, you shrug it off like a flu is what they're seeing for most persons. And the reason is that it is 70 times more effective than the Delta. 70 times more effective than Delta. So it means that before your immune system can kick into overdrive and say, hey, we've seen this bad guy before, you already get infected. But will you come down with a disease? They're seeing that it generally isn't so, where you need to be hospitalized. Let's read here. It says, Omicron has numerous mutations with the potential to increase transmissibility, confer resistance to therapeutics, or partially escape infection or vaccine-induced immunity. That's true. On November 26, the World Health Organization designed a B12529 as a variant concern. They identified, they designated it, as did the US SARS-CoV-2 interagency group on November 30. And they talk about first case when it appeared, but this is what I really want you to zoom in on here. It says, details are available for 43 cases of the COVID-19 attributed to Omicron variant, were in persons aged 18 to 39 years. The earliest date of symptoms onset was November 15 in a person with a history of international travel. 14 persons reported international travel during the 14 preceding symptoms. Among these cases of COVID-19 attributed to the Omicron variant, let's listen now, 79% occurred in persons who completed the primary series of FDA. Man, just say fully vaccinated. 79% occurred in persons who had they were fully vaccinated basically. All right, including 14 who had received an additional booster dose. 5 of the 14 persons that received additional booster dose 14 days before symptomatic onset. 6 or 14% had a documented previous SARS-CoV-2 infection. So what this shows is that it can break through both vaccine-mediated and natural immunity. All right, but for natural immunity and vaccine, you see that more of these, more vaccine persons are coming down with it. It could be that more persons in that area were vaccinated, so it could just be a number thing, or it could be that the vaccines actually open you up to the Omicron in a certain way. We don't know. The most commonly reported symptoms were cough, fatigue, congested runny nose. Wow, thank God. One vaccinated patient was hospitalized for 2 days and no deaths has been reported to date. Case investigations have identified exposures associated with international and domestic travel, large public events, and household transmission. All right, so we close this one there. So what has it shown you? Even though it can infect, nobody is staying in the hospital. That's what they're saying. It isn't lockstep. Like, okay, you get it, hospitalizations, we see a concurrent increase in hospitalizations. Rather, we're seeing the opposite. And for that reason, many persons are saying here, it could be that Omicron is that endemic phase of the COVID-19 where it's a live attenuated strain that everybody's going to receive it because of its R0 value is so high. Everybody's going to get this thing. But it seems like even though everybody gets this thing, that we all won't go into the hospital except something has happened. Fauci came out and said it. That except another variant of concern comes up, this may be it. This may be the end game of everything. We don't know. All right. But I know the name sounds so bad. It sounds to me like a transformer, the age of the Omicron. And and you're gonna get into fear again. But hey, check the science on this thing. What is it showing? It's not showing that, okay? It's showing something different. For example, CNBC News, Fauci says all indications suggest Omicron is less severe than Delta, but still warns people to, take. So what's going on now is a mixture of Delta and Omicron. Delta was the bad guy. He could get you really sick. Omicron seems to be that guy who will give you also some immunity to, any strains that come. And so who knows? This could be it. It's heavily mutated, as we're saying, and this could be what we need. Who knows? Some people are saying, hey, this is nature's vaccine and all these things. I want to end off today because you've really shown interest to stay up with me while I went through these papers, okay? And it's just increasing that stamina, of course. And you've done it. You've come to the end, and I'm going to send these documents to you. The team will do that so you can have them. But we want to talk about a home prevention kit. All right, so you want to have oral and nasal virucidal washes, okay? And you can have diluted betadine or hydrogen peroxide, but you want to do like 2 tablespoons to 6 ounces of water. If you feel that you've been around people, you've been to a funeral, and you want to rinse out, okay? Nasal, oral, rinse and wash, all right? Povidone iodine as well, betadine, otherwise known as betadine, you can use that. All right, nutraceuticals, zinc, vitamin D, 5,000 international units per day, vitamin C, 3,000 milligrams, and quercetin, 500 milligrams, up to even 1,000 on a regular. So you can look for these things in multivitamins that are out there and get your immune system in tip-top working shape. This is something you can do at home, all right, before you become ill, and keep yourself healthy. All right, so am I forgetting anything? Yes? Oh yes, onion and all those things. And I'm not gonna go through all of them, but I'm just talking about these major ones. All right, onions in the socks, no man, it's telling me. But hey, these are some major nutraceuticals and what you need to do, because this is where it attacks you in your nasopharynx, oral nasopharynx, and then spreads from there. Okay. So let me close off here. I'm gonna stop the share. So I'm going to now save the chat, look at the emails that were there, and then send on these studies to those who actually provided these things. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the chat. Okay, great stuff. Thank you for communicating with me and making these things clear, and we will just save it. So have a good night to you all. There's so much more to talk about, but we'll leave it at here tonight. I hope this information helped you so that you can now be on top of everything. You can make informed decisions whether you have received the treatment or not. Going forward, what am I to do? Always go ahead now, take this information and get some good information on it. Question your doctor, question your employer, talk to them. And someone here asked if I can give information on masks. By the way, if you have any questions at this point, you can just go ahead and ask them. I may not be able to answer all of them based on the time, but still you can ask if something was there on your mind. Someone asked, can I give any information on masks? Well, I don't know if they came on, but we were talking about masks earlier on in the session tonight. But basically, the average mask, which is available to a person, that's sold out there for $50, is just the blue mask. It's just a splash guard. That's all it is. It can't filter anything. Matter of fact, the cloth mask, you're breathing in your own oral hygiene. And the thing is, not everybody has great oral hygiene. Okay. And mask won't really filter, except that it's an N95 mask, which is properly worn and cared for. You won't really get any filtration of any COVID-19 in anything. Okay. So bacterial pneumonia, you can actually develop that from breathing in your own ear for the whole day. All right. So mask, it actually goes around the sides, ear goes around the sides, all these things. And mask is to actually protect the next person. All right. Not so much you, it's to have respect for them as you work in a certain area. So if they say, hey, you have to wear it when you're going into stores, I wouldn't say to make it a big deal. If that's the policy now, but we know the policy is not following science. Okay. It's just a thing that people have no mask, no service. And then everybody in there has no mask anyway. That's just Jamaica for you. All right. Okay, so have a great night, everybody. You stayed up and you actually endured. My name is Kenny Williamson, and I'm signing out here, and I'll be sending the studies to those who left their email addresses. All right. Have a good time. Have a good night until maybe next time. I hope this is the last one that we'll have to do. And we'll see what happens next. Stay tuned, stay on your feet. This study would not be enough if we didn't pray tonight. If you're not into prayer, that's your choice, but we must pray to close out tonight, because that is definitely one of the 8 laws of health. All right. Having that godly trust that he will protect you. It never said that you won't go through it. And never said that you should jump to go into it. But he says that even if you go through the fire, you will not be singed. All right. Even if you go through the water, it will not overcome you. That is how God protects his people. He didn't say, I'll keep you from it and you'll be okay. All right. But even if you go through, you'll be all right. So let us pray together as we close it tonight. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for true science, which helps us to discover what you already know. Lord, even if we don't know, you gave us your ways, which obedience will save us. Lord, we thank you that you do not require perfect understanding before we can be obedient, but that you told us a path to walk in. May even this situation cause us to draw closer to you, the one who made our bodies and fashioned it and gave us the manual in how to keep it. Lord, we pray for those who are at the front, government officials. We pray for scientists, those who are in the middle of the fight. We pray for those who are in the hospitals, risking their lives and really caring. Lord, we pray that we will also be responsible, that individuals may be responsible in what they do. But Lord, overall, we pray that you will teach us your way and that we will be patient enough to learn. We thank you that you shower blessings on the just and the unjust, on the thankful and the unthankful, but you reserve a special blessing for those who fear you and live by your name. Have your wonderful way with us now as we give all into your hands. In Jesus' name, amen.